So we're continuing to cook for the junior Iditarod, and now I'm making chocolate chip cookies. And we call these the best chocolate chip cookies. The only difference between regular chocolate chip cookies is that there's oatmeal and just a little bit of cinnamon. I find that the oatmeal helps the cookies stay fresher longer. Sometimes if you just have flour in a chocolate chip cookie, if they're not eaten fairly soon, even if you've frozen them and handled them correctly, they just get dry and crisp. The oats help it stay together and just be more satisfying.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
So, for the chocolate chips, what we're going to start with is 2 cups of butter. I would prefer to have a cup of butter and a cup of lard, but I don't have any lard right now, so we're going with butter. You could use shortening. So, double recipe, 2 cups white sugar, cup of brown sugar, 2 cups of butter. I'm going to beat this, and then I'll come back to you. So, we're making the best chocolate chip cookies, and I creamed the butter and the sugars. So it's just nicely creamed. Next, I'm going to use the electric beater again, and I'm going to mix in 2 teaspoons of vanilla and 2 eggs. Okay, so I have creamed in the butters and the sugars and the vanilla and the eggs. And it's like this. And as I said before, I try to have all the ingredients ready to go. So we're back to the best chocolate chip cookies. And we've got the butters and the sugars mixed and the vanilla and the eggs, and now we're ready to put in the dry ingredients. So as before, I have the sifter, and I have 3 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt. This is a double recipe, remember. So I'm going to sift this in. And for 2 cups of butter, that's obviously not enough dry ingredients, but we have the oats. What I like to do when I'm mixing in oats, I have 3 cups of oats and 2 cups of chocolate chips here. So, one of the things with chocolate chips is you want it to be suspended evenly throughout the cookies. So I found that if you put the chocolate chips and the oats, mix that together, and you pour it in here. And at this point, I don't really like to use a mixer. I like to use my hands. I think it's more gentle on the dough. I will start with this mixture, and then I'll end up using my hands to mix it before we start making the individual cookies. We call this the best chocolate chip cookies. It's a recipe that I've adapted, like most recipes that I have. And this was voted the best for some of our workers. In the springtime, we have breakup here, which means our lake ice breaks. And while it's in the breakup period, you can't land a ski plane because there's not enough ice, and you can't land a float plane because there's not enough water. So nothing can land on the lake at that point. So ever since we've been here, when it was just the kids and Mike and I went years ago, and now sometimes when we have young people here working, we take bets on when the lake ice is going to break. And what that means is that there's enough ice off the lake that a float plane can land, which means it has to be at least 90% open. You don't want a big chunk of ice floating around and hit it with your float plane. So one year, Michael picked the date, and he won. And the choice is to choose whatever kind of cookie you want me to make. And you get to have as many as you want before anybody else does. So Michael chose this recipe. And we've always called it the best chocolate chip cookies. So I have my oven preheating to 350. I have my cookie sheets ready to go. They're not greased. There's enough grease in these cookies that you don't need any grease in the pans. So they're just clean cookie sheets. I heard the oven beep a few minutes ago and tell me that it's at 350. Because I make so many, I actually make my chocolate chip cookies into little balls and then depress it a little bit. Rather than just having rough edged cookies, it makes it easier to store, makes it easier to keep, makes it easier and a little bit prettier presentation. So, I think the dough is ready. Let me get the pan. So again, I've done this a million times. You could put nuts in here too. I didn't put nuts in it today because again, I'm cooking for the junior. Too many people are allergic to nuts to have a bunch of cookies with nuts around, so we'll just keep it clean. The oats make it nice and chewy and kind of makes up for not having nuts. So I just make little balls, and I've done it a million times, so my balls are fairly uniform. But if you would like to, you can use a little scoop until you get used to the size. Again, the reason that you want to have uniform cookies is so that they'll all cook evenly on that cookie sheet. I'm going to put these in the oven. The recipe says 10 to 12 minutes. And generally when I say recipe, it means a recipe that I've taken, started with a basic, adapted till I'm happy with it. So 10 to 12 minutes for the cookies. So I'm going to put it in the oven and put my timer at 5 minutes. And then I will rotate my cookie sheets top to bottom rack and 180 front to back. And when they come out of the oven, I'll show you how that is. But once I get done with this pan, you can use anything. I don't want to leave it totally circle or a total little globe ball because the middle is not going to sink enough and it will be a little too undone in the middle. So generally what I do is you can use anything, I just take my fingers and do a little bit of smush. If you want a little extra, you could dip a glass in sugar and put that on top. I think these are sweet enough so they don't really need that, but it's a total possibility. Okay, this is going to go in the oven. Well, actually it's going to get set aside. I'm going to do another sheet and put them in the oven at the same time. And I'll show you when they're done. Okay, so last step on the chocolate chip cookies. So we have the best chocolate chip cookies that have come out of the oven. A little brown. Again, when you have drop cookies, you're going to let them sit on the cookie sheet for about a minute or two before you try to take them off so that they don't stick or fall apart. Now, because I make multiple trays of these cookies, in between, you don't have to wash the cookie sheet, but there's always a little bit of residue on the cookie sheet. So what I usually do is take a napkin and just wipe that off. If you don't, then you're going to have little burn marks. That is part of the cookie that is left behind, and then the next set of cookies, that'll be on the bottom and it will burn. We don't want that. So here's the best chocolate chip cookies. They smell really wonderful. I hope that one of the guys comes in so we can do a taste test soon. And until next time, enjoy.